So this is stem 11, and this is in the last section of the dot points. There are 4 dot points in the section called evaluation, where we evaluate Hatshepsut's life and reign and other sorts of things. And what we can be asked in these, there are 2 dot points. There's impact and influence of Hatshepsut on her time, and assessment of her life and reign. So they're the 2 areas that we'll look at. So the first dot point that we'll look at is impact and influence on her time. First thing we need to recognise is that there's a difference between impact and influence. The impact of something is an influence or an effect exerted by a new idea, a concept or an ideology. So it's essentially a change. So impact means that there's a change. And influence is a modification, so someone has been swayed by something. So it's kind of like a change, but it's more, an impact's more of a direct change, and influence is more of a subtle change. So the way someone can influence something might lead it in a direction, whereas this is a more obvious change. So an influence is more like a sway, or sway someone has over another sort of thing, if that makes sense. So when we're looking at her impact and influence on her time, that's the other key part here. So we're only really focusing on her time. So it just means the immediate time, so the stuff she did within her reign. We're not really focusing on the time period after her, because there's a whole other dot point about Hatshepsut's legacy that really focuses on that. So impact and influence on her time is the stuff that she actually changed during her lifetime, and things that she had an influence on during her lifetime. So when we're looking at that, in the iBook, it gives you a whole structured response and a sampled response, which isn't the best response. And what we're doing in these last 2 stems and in these last 4 dot points is it's essentially taking everything that we've already spoken about during the whole topic and putting it together in the end. And generally, what these ones that we're looking at here are going to be the 15-mark question. So you can get a 15-mark question from these ones here, which is quite important to note. So there's a 10-marker and a 15-marker, and the 15-marker, these ones, all these dot points, could be a 15-mark question, and you need to be prepared for that because they do come up very, very, very regularly. So in terms of what we're going to include in a response, I'm just going to quickly go through that for this first one. So let's start at the beginning. In terms of a response structure, what we need to make sure is we're looking at the effect of her accession. So what did it mean for this queen to move into a regency and then to come into the co-regency, and what impact did that have on the time? And this is where you really, really, really must look at the sources, the modern and the ancient sources as well. So what effect did that have, that break with tradition have on Egypt? And then we need to start looking at what she continued, okay? So what she continued, what she built on, and what she introduced or changed. Okay, so it's essentially what she continued but added to, and what she introduced that were completely new. And we look at, and for the whole time, every time we look at one of these sections, we look at what she did and then the impact of that. So what she did, the impact, what she did, the impact, and that's kind of how we break it up the whole way through, which is pretty important too. So one of the first things that we need to look at is her image. And then we can look at the co-regency itself and the policies of that. So in terms of the policies, we've got her building policy, her foreign policy, her religious policy, changes to administration, role of royal women, because that's certainly an impact there as well, and that's about it. So it's pretty much most of the whole topic would be included in here, and there's lots of things that we need to talk about in that. So I'm not going to go into any more detail about that. That's just a bit of an overview to get your head around it. The most important part is that you look at how those responses are structured in the iBook, and figure out how you would structure your own response, and look at the amount of depth that's required, and also what needs to be in each response, because for each of these dot points, that's potentially a response you could get. You don't have any choices for Hatshepsut. Whatever you get on the paper is what you have to write about. So it's most important that you know what you're talking about and what goes in each of these responses. The second one that we're looking at is an assessment of her life and her reign. So this is, if it says her life and her reign, her life means her role as a queen, as well as the co-regency, which is here. So it's more than just the time as a king, it's also her role as a queen, and her background and her rise to prominence as well. So that's really, really important to make note of, that it's her life and her reign, not just her reign. So first of all, we have to look at the fact that she became, her background and her rise to prominence and how she managed to do that. So her background and rise to prominence. Then we need to look at the, and that includes her role as a queen. And then we need to look at how her regency and departing from queenly precedence there. The legality of her succession, and why she claimed the throne. And then we have to look at again her image, and then her career, and again within her career we're looking at building program, foreign policy, which is punt and military expeditions, religious policy. What else are we going to look at? Effective relationship to Thutmose III, and effectiveness as a new kingdom king. So how good a king was she in terms of what was expected of a new kingdom king? So there's a lot there, there's a massive amount of information there. It's a 15-mark question. You're spoiled for choice in terms of what you can write about, but you do need to cover most of these things if you want to do well in these responses. And these are ones that you can absolutely practice for. They come up year after year after year. You just need to know what needs to go in each of these dot points and be prepared to write on them and have practice them at home under time conditions, because it's a 15-mark response which gives you about 30 minutes in the exam to write about them. So you're expecting to be quite in-depth responses.